Okay, welcome everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Pretty good? Let me get the chat going. Hi, Professor. At some point, can you go over some how to enable cross-origin for the Heroku stuff? Issues with that. Sure, we can talk about that. Let me put this away. Okay, the chat. And let's close that. Okay, excellent. And let me share my screen. Oops, I'm sharing the wrong screen. Wait. Share screen. It's this one. Share. Okay. Okay. All right, excellent. So let's talk about where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. All right, so let me bring up the syllabus and look at the agenda. Okay. So we're beyond halfway point of the semester, so it's really time to get focused on the final projects. We have plenty of skills now to be able to start actually building something useful. And we know how to work on static pages. We know how to style them. We know how to dynamically render contents. We can talk to a server to store data. Later this week, we'll talk about how to store data permanently in a relational database. So we're going to have the full-blown skills of a full stack engineer, right, to build applications on the web, web applications that go across the entire spectrum, right, of the technology stack. So I wanted to focus focus on the project for the final project, which is due at the end of the semester, and of which the first part, well, obviously, is to get the teams going, but I think we've already made a lot of progress on that. There's quite a folks that have already created their groups in Canvas, and that's perfect. We now have to start looking at implementing our first prototype, right, of whatever it is that you are thinking of building. And so today, what I'd like to do is spend some time and get going, creating a small prototype for you of just to get a notion of what it is that we are expecting from you, and then also talk about some of the dates coming up for finally delivering, working and making progress towards the final project. So, the agenda doesn't show it. Okay, but the here's a couple of assignments that you should be able to see, and they are all project related. And these are in addition to, right, whatever assignments you might be already working to that you're learning about the skills, right? So this doesn't, it's not going to replace, or right, you're going to be able to work on these in tandem. So the first part, we need to have a form teams, which I believe most of you already have. And you need to create some repositories, code repositories, for whatever it is that you're going to be building, right? You'll need at least 2 repositories, one for the middle tier, whether you plan to use Java or Node.js. That you can decide a little later, but you need to have a repository made for the middle tier. You also need a repository for the front end, which my guess is that it would be React.js, but if you prefer to use some other front end technology, that's fine. If you prefer to use Angular or Vue or something else, that's totally fine. But whatever you do choose, you'll need a repository for that source as well. And so you can do that right now. You can create that repository already and then map it to whatever source code you want to push into that repository. So what we're going to be asking you to do is in that repository, we're going to ask you to have a README file in that repository that a little description of what it is that you're building. It's not, it's not a contract. It's not that if you say that's what you can do, that's all you can do. You can change. Obviously, the earlier you settle on what it is that you're building, the faster you can go. But if you could at least just comment in your README file, just a small blurb, just a couple paragraphs that describe what it is that you're building, and in particular that you describe the two types of users that you are going to be designing this for. Right? Remember that the requirements say that you have to have at least two types of users that for which you are building your application. Also, for each one of the users, describe what it is that each user is trying to achieve, right? What are the goals that each user is trying to accomplish, and just an overall strategy of including what API are you getting the data from, right? But that's are you getting the data from through the browser, or are you getting the data from the server, right? And just a very, very brief paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs describing what your strategy is. This is mostly for you, right? We're not going to we're going to be reading them, but we're not going to give you any feedback unless we see something that's absolutely crazy, that you're way too ambitious. Perhaps we might chime in, but this is mostly for you as a check. So that you can have a discussion with your teammates. Also, because my hope is that all these repositories, you're going to be using them as part of your resume, right? When you go out there and interview with folks, you can point to some folks saying, well, this is what I built. This is my repository. You can take a look at my, all the great, industry standards that I'm following, all the best practices, and you can show them. Right, look at how I broke my application. Right, it's all the reducers are under the reducers directory. All the components are under the components. Right, and you can talk about how you structure the program. So it's great for you to use it as a conversation piece for your potential employers. Let's see. There's a question on the chat. It says, how would you recommend handling being logged in to an account? Yeah, we'll talk about logging in. It's part of the talking about the server, and we're going to be talking about maintaining cookies, session. Yeah, that's all coming up. Yep. So if you could create a repository, you don't have to settle yet on whether you're going to use Vue or React.js, but just create a repository. It could be empty. It could have just a README file, and that's all. And in that README, if you could populate this information, and also maybe list there your all the people that are in the team. Yeah, so if you could have this by the 22nd, which is I believe next Monday. Yeah, so that's the first one. So the next one is a prototype, right? So by hopefully by the end of this month, March 29th, you'll have a first prototype of your application. The prototype that I'm going to be building for you today is going to be the it's a minimum set of features that the prototype should have. Obviously, you're welcome to go farther than that. My hope is that you do go much beyond what we're going to be talking about today. But at a minimum, the prototype should show the capability of being able to interact with a third-party API, show that you can go retrieve data and come back and display some kind of lists of what it is that you retrieved, and that if you click on or select any one of those items, that you can then go on a subsequent query and retrieve details about that specific object. So that should be the absolute minimum in your prototype. Obviously, there's plenty of other features that you can work on that I definitely encourage you to push as far as you can. But definitely that is the minimum. And the intention is that Working with third-party APIs is one of the more challenging things to do because you don't own that API, right? Somebody else owns it, and you can't make any changes, and you have to work with whatever they give you. And so learning about it and making sure that you can access it, interact with it, right? That can be the riskiest part of the that'd be great. Again, as far as you can, I would try to move as far as I can. Is everybody hear me okay? Is the internet connection okay? Yes, I'm guessing yes. Okay. All right. So then by the first, thank you. So by the first week in April, the intention is that you'll have a first demo with TAs, right, where you're going to demonstrate with the TAs where you are. Hopefully, you'll have made some progress, and you'll have something interesting to demo. And so in that meeting, it shouldn't be more than 15-20 minutes with the TA. Be very informal, and you're just going to show off what you've accomplished so far, and then you're going to get some feedback from the TA, based on the requirements, right? Making sure that you understood the requirements, that you're not going off track from the requirements. But if you are going off track from the requirements, you can certainly do that, but just let us know so that we make sure that everybody is on the same playing field in the complexity of the project. That we don't have some folks doing so much more than others. We just want to make sure there's at least a base level of complexity from where anybody can go beyond that, right? But there should be a minimum. And so in that meeting, you'll get some feedback, making sure that you do understand some of the requirements. That let you know, say, well, no, that's not really the right interpretation of a requirement. You get a chance to ask and discuss those requirements, and make a plan for demo number 2. For demo number 2, it's going to be in mid-April, April 12th, about a week after that. And so you're going to make some commitments by that week to address some of the feedbacks that the TA might have given you, and you can determine what those what is that you might be missing, and the idea is that you make some commitments that you're going to move the project forward, right? That's the intent of the 2 demo. So this first demo, again, it's April 5th. It should be running on Heroku. That you have the source code, at least of the front end, is on GitHub, and so you'll definitely get some feedback from them, and you can discuss the requirements. And then demo 2, which is again April 12th, you got to come back and demo, making sure that you address some of those concerns. That you might have had to make some adjustments because you had misunderstood some requirements or not, and so demo it again, and then about towards the end of April, actually no, the last day of classes, the last day of classes, I believe, is April 21st. So by then, that will be the final demo to the TAs, right? That's going to be demo week, and so all the projects need to be done by then. Okay. Now on the 21st, obviously not everybody's going to be able to demo. Not all teams can demo at the same time, right? So you have to be done by the 21st, but the demo doesn't have to occur on the 21st, right? We're going to randomly choose folks. So some folks will demo on the 21st, some teams will demo on the 22nd, some teams will demo on the 23rd, right? And all work needs to be completed by the 21st. So make sure that you're all done. Same thing with the demo 1 and demo 2, and not everybody can demo on the 5th, or not everybody can demo on the 12th. But starting on the April 5th, we're gonna make sure that we can schedule folks to demo that day, or then the 6th or the 7th or the 8th, and so the TAs are gonna work with you to schedule you so that you can demo one of those days, right? Again, it shouldn't be more than, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes at most for each team member. I'm sorry, for each team, project team. Same thing with demo 2. So the week of the 5th, right? That demo. The week of the second demo should occur, and then the last month is on the 21st, right? And finally get a final feedback from the TAs. Let's see, there's a question in the chat. My teammates are in another section. How should that work with the demo? Yeah, just coordinate, right? And with everybody. The fact that you're in separate sections is only an administrative quirk, right? That we just need to know that whatever grade we give everybody in that team, right, goes recorded in both sections. But if you're in different sections, then just coordinate. All of you agree that you can meet with the TA a particular time, right? You can do that offline and coordinate with the TA with whatever meets for everybody. Okay. All right. So yeah. So that's the more or less the schedule for the projects. Again, this does not take off the table that there's still several assignments that we need to work on, right? We still need at least 2 assignments, more that we're going to be working on. Actually, no, 3 assignments, at least 3 assignments, not the Angular one. We're not going to do Angular. We're going to do Node.js instead. Okay, any questions about that? All right, if no questions, then let me see. I believe we had created a project for the prototype. This one. Bring it over. Okay. Okay, so let's see. So let's see, there's a question on the chat. Are you able to upload an Angular tutorial separate from class if we won't cover it in class? Sure, I got plenty of videos on Angular. I can definitely make that available. I'll create a playlist for everybody. Yeah, I'll do that. If you could ping me maybe after class, and so to follow up with me to make sure I give that to you. All right, so let's see. We had started by implementing a couple of components, and the idea here is that there will be 2 screens, one where we can do a search or interact with a query out to our API, our third-party API, and then a second component where we're going to display the results of that query. Right? Unknown caller. Oops. Sorry. Okay, so let's see. So we had our index screen here. We had the app. In that app, we still have the default implementation for that app. If we run it, right, we can create a command here to run it using npm. We say npm and run the command start. And we can apply, and then we can just run it from the runtime here. So this is going to start the default React application, right? Let's see, just making sure that that's still up, that's still working. Maybe no. Oh, there it is. Okay, so let's maybe put this on the right-hand side, and we can put this on the left-hand side like that. And we can do some navigation here, making sure that we can navigate between the search and the details, right? We have those 2. So let's replace this. Let's replace that with both components. They have the search and details, search and detail. So we can have the search, and we can have the detail. There we go. We have search and detail, and probably don't want these this app.js. Okay. All right, excellent. So we might want to navigate between the two. So we can bring maybe a router, right? I don't know if do we install that? Probably not. Browser, no, did. You can look at all the things that we've we have installed. So here, if we look for React router DOM, no, it doesn't look like we installed it. Okay, so let's install that. So we can say npm install React router DOM. So that's going to install it, and we'll be able to include it here. Let's see if we did we do Bootstrap? I forget if we did Bootstrap. Doesn't look like we did Bootstrap. So we should also install Bootstrap. All right, so while that's happening, let's keep going. In the search, right, we're going to want to implement. We're going to implement some search, right? So maybe put here like an input field, right? And then under here, maybe a list of all the results, right? So result 1, and then several results, okay? Something like that. And maybe a button under the input field where we can actually do the search. We would say search. And for now, this is going to be a simple input field, but this can be as complex as you want. Let me see, there's a question on the chat. So React Router DOM, and others have to be installed in every directory they're needed from can't be global install. Yeah, no, we want it to be part of that one project, because they're going to be all your projects typically going to be deployed separately, independently of each other, and they have to have their own copy, right? Maybe in your local machine, it might be okay if you install it globally, right? So that each one can find it in your global space, right? But when you deploy it on Heroku, right, then it's not going to find it, right? So it needs to have all those libraries part of it. Okay. So yeah, so we have the search as when we type and we click on search, right? It would go out to the server, come back with results, and display them here. In the details, we can have things such as here in the details, right? We're going to be searching for movies, right? So here we might have an image, right, with some source, right, some image there. We might have a paragraph with some plot. Okay, maybe we might have some UL with the various cast members, right? So Harrison Ford and Sigourney Weaver. I don't know if I spell it right. Right, and Mark Hamill. Okay, so that here, let's see, we can render that. There it is. We have some image, the plot, and the folks that are the cast members of the movie. Okay. All right. So we want to be able to navigate between the two, and so if I click on search, right? If I click on a specific one, right, it navigates to the details, and then when I say okay, right, it comes back to the search, so I can search again. Okay. All right. So how are we going to retrieve this? So we're going to be using the following library. The following API for retrieving data, right? And it's the OMDB API that I might have described to you, right? That allows you to retrieve like an array of movies and TV shows that match a search criteria, right? We want to be able to do this dynamically, right, from our UI, right? So okay, it looks like this is done here. project configurations. We're also going to be, I'm going to kick off also the Bootstrap install. So we say npm install Bootstrap. Okay, so while that's going, let's work here. So yeah, so we want to be able to dynamically do this query on the right-hand side, right? So as a good practice, right, we're going to hide all communication with the server, right? So we'll create here a directory, and we'll call services in here. And in here, we're going to create the movie service, right? That's going to allow us to retrieve movies or retrieve an individual movies, right? So this is going to be a JavaScript. So this will be, you know, movies service. Okay. All right. So Bootstrap is done. Let's see if we can also install Font Awesome. I forget what the Font Awesome install is. Font Awesome CDN. Font Awesome CDN. It's here. I forget what the install is. npm, no. npm. Package, let's see what it was. npm install, blah, 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 blah. I think it's this one. Okay. Let's copy that. Let's paste that. So that it will install Font Awesome as well. All right, yeah, so let's keep going. So yeah, so here's the movie service. This is where we are going to want to access this URL over here, right? We're going to be able to hit this over here. And so the functions that we're going to call is, for instance, I want to be able to retrieve movies for a particular search criteria, and then which is going to return to me an array of things like this array on the right-hand side over here. Or I want to retrieve an individual movie, right? Which is a different query. If you know the ID of the movie, you can use instead I, right? And the ID, right? And that retrieves the information about that specific movie, right? So let's use these two. And so, for instance, this might be you know, export. This is so export const find. Let's see, find movie by title, right? And we pass in the title, right? And we're going to do some kind of fetch here, right? And the query that we're going to go, right, is this query over here, right? So it'll be the URL. Will be that's the URL, and the key is I'm going to hard code it there. And that's mine. I pay for that, right? Don't use my API key. But this one, the Batman over here, is going to be that title as an argument parameter, right? So we can create a variable here and include the title in here. Okay, so that's going to come back with from the server, the response. Right, we're gonna parse that. Right, and then we're going to export this. Right? We're going to export this. So we're going to say export default, and then include here all our functions. Right, so find movie by ID by title. Right. The other query that I want is I want to be able to retrieve an individual movie. Right. If I know their primary key, which in this case is IMDb ID, then I want that query as well. So the query is almost identical to this one. Right, but it's going to have, you know, by ID. So find ID, right? And so this one's going to be an ID. So IMDb ID. Okay, and the query here is not with S, but with an I. Okay, and those are the two queries that I really care about. All right, there we go. Okay, so now I can use this in my two screens, right? In the search screen, and I can use it in the in my details screen, and so that I can render both of them. Okay, so let's do that. If we go back to our search screen, we can import now this service, right? We can say, you know, import movie service, from, and we can go maybe up and then services and then we service. Okay. And once we have that, right, we can use this when if we need to, if we click on like on the search button. Okay. All right, excellent. So let's go. What are we going to do here? First of all, let's see if we could do the navigation, because one of the things that we would like to be able to do is that in the search screen, right? You know, if I type a search term and I do search, right? I'm going to go out to a server, come back, and I render. But what happens if I refresh the screen? Right? If I refresh the screen, right, all my results will be gone, right? So I want to make sure that I remember enough information, right, so that if I do a refresh, right, I want to make sure that I have the data stored over here somehow, right? And the way we're going to do this is that we're going to encode the search term as part of the URL, right, so that we can always recreate that search, right, and re-render our screen. Let's see. There's a question on the chat. It says, I noticed you use a relative routing for importing. Is there something, because my homework importing has a lot of stuff in my server? Yeah, so you can do tilde, right, and that will start you off from the root, and from there you can navigate down to node underscore modules or down into source. So yeah, there's you can do absolute as well. Which I think we've done for Bootstrap, right? Right. So, for instance, in an index, right, we can import. What is it? I forget. Bootstrap. Oh, okay. No. All right. No, I guess. Right. So if you start off with nothing, right, it assumes that you are at the root. So let's do this dist CSS bootstrap min, right, that's the whole bootstrap, and we can import also font awesome, CSS all, but there's also tilde, which you can allow you to do this absolute. All right, so we added those, and so we can start adding some styling here. Let's see, we don't have any of that. We don't really need this. We're not having that CSS, and in app we can just use here, not app, but we can do something like container fluid. Let's see if the styling works. Oh, it's not finding something. Bootstrap man, yada yada yada. Is that not it? Did I misspell it somehow? No, that looks right. We restart. Okay, so we have Bootstrap installed, right? Okay, so we want to be able to navigate between the two. So how do we do that? We're going to do in the app. What we're going to do is that we're going to create a router here. So it will be a browser router. There it is, from React Router DOM. And we're going to have two routes, right? One that's going to allow me to navigate to search, and the other one will navigate to details. Okay, so this will be route. So if the path looks like as follows, right? So I'm going to have an array, and the default, I want this to be the default thing that you see, right? The search, right? Also, if you do a search, you say search all by itself, right? We're gonna be here. Or finally, if you do search and then title, okay, we also want to be in here. Okay, and we're gonna bring this in React Router DOM. There it is, and so this is going to render the search screen. Okay, and we're also going to say that this is exact equals true. All right, so that's the first route. The second route is going to have details. So details is going to be if we go to if we navigate to details, and we're going to pass, as an argument, we're going to pass the IMDb, okay, as part of the path, okay? So what this is going to allow us to do is that we're going to, by default, be in the search, okay? And if we navigate to root, or if we navigate to search, then we show this. Probably this one would be better if you map it to maybe to a home screen or something, right? So that would be our home screen maybe, right? So yeah, so let's just show that. So if we have here a JavaScript here that might be home, right? And that looks very much like the search. So this will be, you know, import React from React, and then this might be just a const home that renders just h1 home. Okay, this is export. And maybe this one can give us a link to the search, for instance, right? So this would be to search, something like that. Search and link, we need to import that. From React Router DOM. Why is it not finding it? More actions. Oh, there it is. Link. Yeah, so that's going to allow us to navigate there, right? So in the navigation, right, we might want to just remove this and say that you know, if the default navigation will be home. This home, like that. Okay, so let's just try it out. If we click on search, notice that it navigates to search. Perfect. Okay, and the result is going to be as follows, right? Each one of these results will be some kind of a link. This will be a link, right? And so each one of the results will be a different link, and it'll be something like to, you know, details, and then the ID, you know, some ID, right? So if I click on results, notice it navigates to details and the ID is encoded in the URL. See that, right? Also, the search, right? If you go back here, notice that we're going to encode the search term, right, in the title. That means that in search, right? If you had type search, or you type something like Batman, say you search for Batman, like that. Notice that it comes back to this search here, right? The reason you want to do that is that when you first come into the screen, it's empty. You haven't searched for anything. But once you type here something like Batman, right, and you do a search, right, it's going to go out to the server. It's going to come back. Right? It's going to search and going to display all the Batman movies. Yes, right. If you don't have here anything here, if you refresh, you'll go back to just nothing. It won't show any results, and we won't remember anything. Okay. But if you encode as part of the URL here, right, then you can grab that that title and do the search again. Right, and repopulate this dynamically. That makes sense? All right, so let's see if we can actually do that. Right. So for instance, we can grab that. We can say we can grab use params, right? And we can retrieve the parameter, the title, right? So this will be const title use params, right? Spell it, const. Okay, and then that parameter could be used to populate this. We can say value equal title. Okay, so if we type something here, so we say Batman. Notice that we can remember what it is that you searched for. See that? and we can use that to do a query back and retrieve that, right? Let's do that. Let's actually do that, right? We can say here, use effect. Let's bring use effect. I think we need to bring it here. We probably need to use state as well. Use both of them. So when we load, we're going to do what? We're going to check to see if we have a title. There might be no title, right? Because it could be that we navigate here, we navigate here without anything, right? We navigate here, there's nothing, so there's nothing for us to do. But if there is, right? So if title, so if there is a title, I would like to do the search. Okay. So what are we going to be using for search? We're going to be using the movie service. We're going to say find movie by title, and we're going to pass it the title, right? And then the response, right, is going to be the results, right? This is going to be the result, and what does the result look like? The result is actually this object right here. So this object has 3 items, right? So the entire result object has 3 portions, right? It has the search, which is basically the search, okay, which has the actual array. See that? Right. So we can, so the result here, right? We can do console log and display. Let's see what's in there, right? Result. Okay, so if we come here and take a look at the inspect, let's see what we have here. And we can just put it here on the bottom. Right, we look at the console. And so if we type in Batman here, so Batman, there it is. See that? There's our array. See that with the results of Batman. We could use this to just iterate and display our results. Okay. This is complaining. Oh yeah, it's complaining about the input field. Yeah, we'll deal with that in a minute. All right. So we could just iterate over this. Maybe store it in a local state variable, right? So that we can iterate over it. Okay. So let's do that. We can say const results, and then set results. Okay, and this could be use state, right? Initially, it could be just an empty array, an empty object, right? And here we can just say, set results. Okay, which we can use to then render over this, right? So, for instance, we could say, this is list group, right? And then iterate over the results if we have any, right? We can say results dot search, right? That's the array. We're going to map over it, right? And what's in there? A movie. And we can just display a line item for each one of them, where the key will be, I believe it includes the IMDb. Yeah, includes the IMDb. There it is, right? So the key will be movie.imdb, and we can display the title, movie.title. I think it's capital T. Yeah, it's capital T. All right, let's see where we are. See if this broke. Okay, all right, it is breaking. Set results is not a function. Set results. Did I misspell it? Set, oh, this is an array, sorry, this is an array. And let's refresh. Map, okay, so probably we need to initialize this as search with an empty array. There we go. Okay, so this looks somewhat promising. Actually, this should be bracket and then like that. There we go. See that? We have results for Batman because it somehow Batman, right, was part of that URL, right? And then we're using it to do our search. So basically what we're doing is that we're encoding our search as part of the URL, right? So that if I refresh, Notice if I refresh, Batman is part of that, right? And does the query again. Let's see, it looks like there's a, okay, no, there's no question. All right, excellent. So did that make sense? Right, so let's see, this is a list group item. Okay, there we go. That looks much better. And maybe we can clean this up a little bit. This is form control. And there's a button. BTN, and maybe this is primary or something. Okay, that looks much more presentable. All right, so does it make sense? Let me just erase some of this stuff here. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So in addition to this, right, we can make each one of these movie titles a hyperlink, right, that can navigate to our details screen, right, encoding screen. We can do maybe a subsequent query that retrieves information about that specific movie, right? So let's see if we do that, right? So here we're going to do a link, right, and we're going to encode as part of the URL with the IMDb, right? So let's do that. So we're going to say to is going to be an expression because we want to create that URL dynamically, right? So it's going to go out to details, right? And we're going to encode here the IMDb of the movie, right? So it will be movie dot IMDb ID. I notice that now these are queries, these are URLs, so that if I click on it, it navigates to the details screen, and it has the ID encoder in the URL. See that? So that's 590. Go back and click on another one. Notice that it's 197, right? And we can use that information to fetch details about that movie using our other query. Yes. All right, excellent. Let's work a little bit on the details, right? So on the details, right, we could use this this additional service that we have that retrieves movies by their IMDb, right? So let's we'll need both the use state and use effect, right? So which we can use to declare a new state variable that has the details of the movie. So we'll call it just movie and set movie. Use state. Initially, it'll be empty, no movie, and we can use our find movie by IMDb to go fetch this movie using the ID. So we'll need to parse that out of the URL, right? And I believe we called it. What do we call it? Yeah, we call it IMDb. So we need to parse that out, right? So let's parse it out. From where? From use params. Which we have to load, right? So we have to load use params from, what is it? React router DOM, is it? Okay. So this is going to parse out from the path, the ID of the movie, which we can then use to do the query. And the query, we can use the service to retrieve that. Right? So it would be something like import movie service from, and we're going to go up one services and then the movie service. So here, when we load, we can say use effect, right? We are going to do what? We are going to use the movie service dot find movie by ID. Then we're going to pass it the IMDb, right? We'll pass it the IMDb, which we just parsed from the path, right? And the results is going to come back as the movie object, the movie object. Right? So it's going to be the movie, which we're going to use to populate our movie. See that? And under here, we can just print it out to see what the movie is coming back as. So we say JSON.stringify the movie object. There it is. So there's the JSON representing the entire movie object, right? Which we can use to just render whatever pieces we want, right? So for instance, we got the title, right? We got the year that it came out, the rating, right? The release date, the runtime, the genre. We have all the information about the movie we just retrieved. Okay. So for instance, for the image, right? We can use the poster, right? So we can say that for the image, right? We can say movie dot poster. Let's see what that looks like. There it is. So we got a poster image for that. We got a couple more things here. We got the title, right? So maybe instead of details, right, we can say, you know, movie title. So Batman, right? And so we can go back and click on another one. Maybe we can click on this one, Batman Begins. There it is, Batman Begins. Or the Lego Batman movie. There it is, right? We have maybe the actors, right? We got what else have we got? We got the director, maybe the plot. Do we have a plot? So we render here the plot. So this could be, you know, where's the plot? Oh yeah, there's a plot. Okay. Oh, these are the cast. All right, maybe we should put things here. We could say plot. This is H2 plot. And here we can have H2 cast. For the casts, what do we have? Let's see. Cast. Actors, maybe? There's actors. Actors looks like it's an array. Well, actually, no, it looks like a comma-separated string. See that? Right, so what we could do is split this array on the comma, and then it converts it into an array, right? So we could say maybe, movie, you know, actors. Let's see what that renders. Where did it render? Movie that actor. Oh, actors. Sorry. There we go. So they're the actors. We can split them. We can split it. We can say split on the comma. So that converts it into an array. So that's an array now. We can iterate over that array. Right? We can say dot. So we can put this in a UL here. Right? We can say dot map over the array, and you get each one of the actors. And for each actor, we can return a new LI that contains the actor. Okay, it is Will Arnett, Michael Sura, Rosario Dawson, right? And we can remove these hard-coded ones. And we can make it look a little prettier, right? Saying that this is a class name list group, and maybe make this look a little prettier. We have this is a list group item. Okay, so that looks much better. Okay, we have the plot, the cast, we have the movie image, right? And probably we don't need anything else. You know, probably obviously you can do much better and add all sorts of really interesting things, such as there's also the ratings and the Metacritic, right? And IMDb, movies, Rotten Tomatoes, right? So you can make this look much prettier. Okay. All right. So we have that. Let's go back. Let's go back and try to make this work a little better, right? We want to be able to edit this. Notice that we can't edit it. Right. So the only way that we can edit is to have a state variable that we can then change on when the text changes, right? So let's go back to the search. So in the search, so on the search, let's see, we have the title from the params, right? But we want to be able to edit it, right? Just like that, we can't edit it because it's in the params. It's not a state variable. Okay. So let's see what happens when we don't have any search. We don't have any search is not even doing the query, right? It's just empty. Okay. So what we need to do is create an intermediate state variable that we can edit, right? So let's do that. So we're going to say const, search title, call it. We'll say set search title, right? As part of a use state. And initially there's nothing. It's an empty string. Actually, no, we can initialize it with title, right? But we'll do that. We'll do that in the use effect, right? We want to guarantee that when this runs, we have the title and we can populate it, right? So we're going to say, set the search title to be the title. Okay. If we have a search title, then we want to do the rendering, right? Now we can edit it, right? Because it's a state variable. We can say, on change, right? We can say, the event, and we can replace it. We can say set search title to be the event dot target dot value. Okay, so now we should be able to edit it, as we type, and then when we click on search, then we want to do the search. Okay. All right, so let's do that. So when we do the search, when we do the button is when we want to do the search. And we want to encode the search term in the URL, right? So let's do that. So on click, right, when we click on it, right, we want to encode the search title in the URL, right? And that should kick off the search, right? So we're going to say on click. What we're going to do is that we're going to change the URL, right? So to change the URL, we're going to use another React router DOM to do that, right? We have history. Remember that? We have use history. Use history is going to allow us to modify the URL, right? So let's grab that. So it says const history, use history. Okay. Now with use history, we can encode things in the URL. So when we click on this, we're going to use history. We're going to say history dot, and we're going to push. We're going to push, and it's going to be search followed by the term that we are searching by, right? So this will be search title, whatever we've been searching. Okay. So I'm using history because there's a question here. Should we use redirect or use history? So the reason I'm using history is because I want to maintain a history of all the things that you've searched. Right? I should be able to go back, and it would remember all the things that you've searched, right? And you can say, "Oh, what is that I searched in the history?" So, or redirect would just reload the whole thing, right? So let's try that. So we type here avatar and click on search. Notice that it didn't work. What? What happened here? Search title. Search title. Search title. Did I misspell it? Search title. Search title. Why is it not? So we have been setting it. Set search title. We have been setting it. Let me make sure that we have been changing it. Let me just print it out here. Okay, I'm searching. Oh, it's not changing. What's going on here? Search title. Search title. Set search title. Set search title. Event. Set search title event.target.value. Search title value. Why is it not rendering? Search title. Let me display it there. Interesting. Wait a minute. Let me see. A component, blah, 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 on change, events, search title. Let me just put a breakpoint here. Let me step through this. Sort, okay, and this is, I want to open up search and search.js. So search.js. Let's put a breakpoint right here. Let me type something. Okay, let's look at the target value. There it is. So it is calling that. Search title user fact title. Oh, oh, you know what's happening? This is only if it has changed, probably, right? If the title has changed, let's see. Okay, there it is. Yeah. Okay, so if I type, I do the search, right? It searches something weird. All right, fine. Let's try avatar. Okay, there it is. Okay, so I can now, presumably I can search now whatever, Batman, let me see. Enter, there we go. Okay, and I don't need this anymore. So before I didn't have this, so that means that it was reloading and there was nothing in the term as empty, right? And it was setting it to empty again. Right? And so yeah, so notice that now when I click on something and I search for something like aliens, I do search. Notice that it encodes it, right, as part of the URL, and it has all the values. If I type in Titanic, right, it searches Titanic and perfect, right? Notice if I go in there, it doesn't work. We'll see. I guess it didn't have any actors. But notice that if I go back, notice that it refreshes the screen. Okay. Aliens. Okay, let's see what's going on here. Why is this not working? Split. Why isn't that working? Let's see. Details. Details we have here. So it's searching through this or not. Let's see. Well, probably because I'm trying to split on something that is not there. Because set movies doesn't have that, right? So probably we want to make sure we put a guard in front of it. So if there is an actor, then you can split it. There we go. All right, so if we go back, aliens in the attic, right? Notice that it can go in, right? And then when you go back, it remembers that you have to search for aliens, right? Or we have here Terminator. I have a thing for James Cameron. Right, we search for that Judgment Day, right? We have Judgment Day. If we go back, notice that it remembers going back. And that's because we have it encoded in the URL. Otherwise, it would not work, right? And also, if I refresh, it also works, right? Which is great because I can also copy this. And maybe if you have Safari, I could email you this URL, right? And you can paste the same URL that I have on my browser. You can paste it in there and you will see exactly the same thing, which is exactly what we want, right? There's enough information in the URL that you can recreate the page identical to what I have, right? And that's what we mean by encoding the state of the application in the URL. You should always encode enough information in the URL then you can recreate the page, right, with everything that you have encoded in there. Okay. All right. Any questions? All right, excellent. Yeah, so this is the absolute minimum, right? You know, this going back and forth and being able to encode it in the URL and navigating to a details page screen and then coming back and recreating the content, right? This is the absolute minimum, right, that we would require for you to have in your prototype implementation. Hopefully you'll go much beyond that, and you'll be way on your head on your way to building something pretty cool, pretty interesting. But this is the absolute minimum that we would require from you in the prototype. Okay. All right. Any questions? All right. If you don't have any questions, I do want to talk about state management. Right, somebody was asking about logging in and whatnot, so let's talk about that. Since you'll need to be able to log in. Right, so let me in the Java project. So this is the Java project that this is the same Java project that we worked on last week, right? That we worked on doing the RESTful API. Right, so let's talk about that a little bit. Okay. So there's a whole set of slides that cover that topic, and let's see somewhere here. Okay, maintaining state. Oops. Maintaining state in the application server. It's part of the RESTful API set of a presentation. Let's see. Let's see if I could bring that up here. Okay, application state. Is it big enough for you? Right. So what we're going to be doing, right, is that we're going to be using a technology called cookies, right, to maintain the state of the user. You saw that by encoding enough information as part of the URL, the application could maintain state. It could remember things, right, from one request to the next. Right? And that's important because HTTP by default, right, out of the box, right, is a stateless protocol, meaning if you have a server and you have multiple users hitting that server, right, the server has no way of distinguishing one request from the next. Okay. Well, obviously you can look at the IP address and see that there's two different people, but in general, right, it doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't use that to distinguish you from somebody else, right? And so there's no way for it to know that it's the same user sending the same request, right? And so that can be somewhat annoying, right, for some applications that you're trying to implement. So we do want to maintain some kind of state, and this is how we're going to be doing it. Right. So the way we're going to be doing it is that we're going to be using a technology called cookies, right, where browsers are going to agree to remember things from the server that is going to be providing some information, right? So the way it works is that a user goes to their to a particular website, and if it's the very first time that they ever visited, say they're visiting acme.com, the browser is going to respond saying, "Oh, this is the first time you come here, right?" Oh, well, sorry, no. First of all, I was going to say, the browser is going to say, "Well, before I let you go to acme.com, are there any cookies for acme.com, right?" So what the browser does is that it keeps track for each domain, right? abc.com, cbs.com, cnn.com, right? It keeps track of cookies, which are just small strings, right, that are stored on the browser's end, right, on the file system of the browser, and so for that domain, right, it sees if there's any cookies for that domain, right? If it does, if it doesn't, right, then it just basically sends it to the server saying, "Sorry, I don't have any cookies for you. Right? You never gave me cookies. This is the very first time that I come here." And the server's gonna say, "Oh, okay, fine, that's okay. I'm gonna create a cookie for you." Right? It'll be a random cookie, a random string, but it will remember, the server will remember that random string, right? And what it will do is that in memory, it will keep an object that is keyed off of that cookie, that random ID that it created, right? So it creates that session for this user, and it'll use that ID to know that this session, right, matches that ID, okay? If user number 2 comes in, they'll get a different cookie, right? And they will have a different object in memory, right? That is keyed off of that different ID, right? So if it's 2 of us, right? You know, I have a cookie, and there'll be an object keyed off of my cookie, and person number 2 will have a different cookie, and we'll have a different session object keyed off of their cookie. Make sense? So we each get our own cookies, right, from the server, and the browser stores it in the cookie jar, right, for that domain, right? So that next time around, when I send another request back to the server, this time around I will have a cookie for that domain, right? And I will provide that cookie to the server. The server says, "Ah, it's you again." Okay, so you're not new anymore, right? So this time around, I will use the same cookie that I gave you 2 minutes ago, right, to retrieve the HTTP session. I can, you know, your application on the server, right, on the server can use that HTTP session to store anything you want that is specific to that cookie, okay, which makes it specific to that user. Right? You could put in there any object, right? You could put a shopping cart, right? And so since it'll be a different instance, right, of the HTTP session for user 1, and user 2 will have a different HTTP session, we might have 2 different instances of a shopping cart stored in our sessions, right? So that, you know, as I am interacting with the server and I'm adding things to my cart and removing things from my cart, it'll be my cart. Whereas you, right, with your cookie, you'll have your own shopping cart in a different session, right? And you're adding and removing. It's your data. That makes sense? So you would write the application in such a way that you just work with the session, right? The application never really cares about the cookie. By the time the application gets it, by the time you get to the application, all that low-level cookie indexing and finding what the session is for that cookie, all that is transparent, right? You already get the session that is yours, right, for that particular cookie, right? So you don't have to care about cookies and who gets what cookie and whatnot. That's already done for you, right? So let's show you how it works. So let's create an HTTP session example, right? Just a controller, just a regular controller like we already know how to do. Right, so let's go to source main Java, right? And in here, right, there's in controllers, right, we're going to create a controller, and we're going to call it what do we call it? HTTP session examples. Okay, there it is. And it's going to be just like any other controller, right? So remember, REST controller just allows me to communicate with this thing, right, through an HTTP protocol, right? So we want to be able to do 3 things, right? We want to be able to set some piece of information. We want to be able to retrieve that information, and we want to be able to invalidate the entire session, right? So these 2, set is going to be able to allow me to read and store data in the session, right? And then the get at session is going to allow me to retrieve data that I had previously put in there, and then invalidate is going to allow me to just say, all right, just clear out anything that I had. For instance, if I log out, right, or if I time out, right, I don't want that information to stay in the server anymore. Okay, so let's do that. Let's implement this. Let's copy that. And so in here, let's bring in the get mapping. Let's bring all these guys, right? Okay, there it is. So let's go with what this does, right? So this is a mapping, just like any HTTP GET request mapping. I'm putting API in front of it, right? And I'm putting session in front of it, right? And I'm saying set, right? So this is hard-coded. And the way that I hit this function is by putting this hard-coded part in my URL. And then here I have 2 placeholders. One is some name of some attribute and some value. And what I'm trying to show you here is that I can store anything I want, right? Right now, there's just going to be plain strings, but it could be an entire object. Right? So the attribute, that definitely has to be a string. It's treated like a dictionary, like a map, right? Where the key is a string, but what you store in that map could be anything. For now, we're just going to store strings. We're going to store a value, which is a string, but it could be a shopping cart. It could be anything, right? So the way it works is that basically this is where the magic happens. See that? There's this new object called HTTP session, and this object, what you get here, the session is already based on whatever cookie, right, matches with the browser. So if browser 1 hits you, right, and comes in here, they'll get one session. But if browser 2 comes in, same URL, same exact URL, it'll be a different cookie, right? So they'll get a different session, right? So browser 1, they can store, username Alice, right? Whereas browser 2, you could say, username Bob, okay? And so because the session is different from 2 different browsers, they will be storing different information in their own sessions. That makes sense? Right. So let's try it out. Okay, let's now also retrieve the data, right? Let's now retrieve the data. Let's copy that. Let's bring it down below. So this one's going to allow me to. Again, these are just examples. Right? What you actually would be implementing would be things such as login, register. I'm going to I want to see my current profile, who's currently logged in, and things like that. We'll do that in a minute. But this is just to show you and demonstrate the concept. Okay, so this allows me to pass in an attribute, and it's going to use that attribute to retrieve whatever I had previously stored at that key. Okay, that key could be the shopping cart, right? And the shopping cart can contain a whole object, an array of items that I have put in the shopping cart, right? And this is just going to retrieve it. Right? And finally, we're going to clear the session. I'm going to say invalidate. For instance, if you're logging out, you want to just have the server just forget. Okay. All right. Excellent. Let's run this. Okay. So let's see. Let's see if it's running. Where's run? Okay, it's running. So to demonstrate, I'll show you 2 browsers. Okay, we'll have 2 browsers, 2 tabs. And the URL, I believe it was, it'll be localhost 8080. And it was API session set. And say somebody logs in and they say, okay, my username is Alice. Okay, notice that it comes back with username equal Alice. See that? So this wrote to the session, right? And say somebody on this side does something similar, localhost 8080, and same thing, API /session/ set username Bob. Okay, right. So again, this is a completely different user hitting the same exact URL. Okay, same exact URL. Right, so now I'm going to say get username. Notice that it comes back as Alice. Right, so this browser, because it has its own cookie, right, comes back as Alice. This one, right, we can say get. Notice it comes back as Bob. See that? Same exact URL. But because they're separate browsers, each one gets a different cookie. You can look at the cookie. You can see here. You can see here in the network. If I refresh, look at the username, you'll see that part of that URL. There's a cookie right there. See that? There's a cookie. That's a generic. It's this one right here, JSession ID. This JSession ID is what the Java server is providing. It's called JSession ID. That's the name of the cookie, and that's the value which is dynamically generated. It's random. Whereas on this side, actually on Safari, I don't know how to do it on Safari. Let's see the network. There it is. See that? It has a different JS session ID. This one starts with 01F6, and this one is with starts off with 1C81C7. See that? The two different cookies. So that's why when let's see, there's a question in the chat. Why is set session attribute a get mapping? Let's see. Why is set session? Why is this a get? So whether this is get, post, put, it doesn't matter. I only made a get so that it makes the example easier, that I don't have to generate a post or put or delete. Okay, all the requests pass in the cookie back and forth, whether it's put, post, delete, doesn't matter, right? And if you ask for a session, the session that you will get will be keyed off of the value of the cookie. Right, so for this one, the key is 1C81, whereas this one is 01F, right? So browser number one, right, my Chrome is getting a session different than the session being retrieved by the Safari browser, right? So when Chrome comes in here, it sets the attribute username with a session object. But when the Safari comes in here, they get a different instance of the session object because it's a different cookie. So when they set the attribute of the session of the username to Bob, it's on a different session, right? And subsequent queries, like when I get the session, when Chrome comes in here and I ask for the session, right? It'll be for the same cookie that I used earlier to set the attribute, right? It's the same cookie. That's why it's the same session. That's why Chrome gets Alice, but Safari, having a different cookie, they get a different session. And when they get the attribute, they get a different object, Bob. That makes sense, right? So each one is maintaining different cookies, different sessions, and whatnot, right? In this way, browsers can have thousands of sessions, right? Which it can have different conversations with different folks, simultaneously, and maintain different objects for each one of them. Make sense? All right. Right. So this, we can expand this. We can expand this idea and start talking about creating login and registration, things like that, right? So for instance, let's keep going a little further. So login and registration, right? So how can we use this idea to log in and register folks? Okay, so here it is. Let's see, there's a question in the chat. Before class ends, could we go over the course for Heroku? Oh, yes. Let me just quickly just talk about that. So here, so this is all in good, right? If we are accessing here from the browser and everything's good. But when you introduce JavaScript accessing this, right, you'll need to use cross-origin, right? And cross-origin, you should be able to just say origins equal star, okay? And this should allow this controller to be accessed from anywhere, right? Now, more specifically, you want to be able to do the following, right? So let me talk about cross-origin, the way it works, okay? So right now, when we are accessing this, right? When we do the access, we see a username. It goes and retrieves it, and everything's good. Yes. Now, if this were a JavaScript doing it, right? If, like, for instance, this over here, this search here, this search here, this search, and we see the network. Okay, so notice that here it's going out to where is it? Terminator here, right here. So this is a JavaScript file making this query, right? It wasn't us typing it, right? This was programmatically done by a JavaScript file, right? Code, and so the browser treats both requests differently. If it's me typing the URL like that, right, then the browser does not consider that to be a security risk, right? Because It's me, I'm going to this website, I'm typing it. So presumably I know what I'm doing, right? But it treats programs or JavaScript, it treats them differently, right? It looks like, okay, well, this is a JavaScript making this request. This could be malicious, right? It could be that, you know, you have a small JavaScript here and you are typing away and it's listening to whatever you're doing, right? And it's doing something malicious. It's trying to do something malicious. So it puts some restrictions on what JavaScript can do, you know, sending requests back to servers, right? One of the limitations that it does is that JavaScript is only allowed to send a request back from where the JavaScript was downloaded, right? So for instance, notice that so for instance, this search here was generated by who? Was generated by a movie service. Movie service is the one who generated this request. Yes. Okay. And where did it come from? It was downloaded from localhost 3000. See that, the URL? You can see that, you know, localhost 3000. That JavaScript was downloaded. So by default, the browser says, okay, if you were downloaded from localhost 3000, I'm only going to allow you to make requests back to localhost 3000. So the question is, well, how was it that it was allowed to talk to OMDB API? You know, why did it was downloaded from localhost 3000, but it was able to send a request to OMDB API? That's where CORS comes in, right? CORS allows you to allow certain things to happen, right? It allows you to say that it is okay to cross origin, that one origin, if you download something from one origin, is going to allow to communicate with somebody in another origin, right? Another domain. Normally, that's not allowed, right? The browser would stop you, okay? Only if the target domain allows it, then it will allow it through, right? So how does a server, right, on the target domain say to the browser, it's okay, I am accepting requests from browsers or from JavaScript files that were downloaded that are not mine, right, that somebody else's, right? The way you configure that is by using this cross origin. So cross origin is saying, yes, I am accepting requests from everybody, right? The star here says it's okay, I'm accepting for anybody. So others Piazza did too. So depending, right? So also, if you use HTTP, right? Notice that this is HTTP. See that HTTP? This means that it's not secure, right? The data that is going in here is not being encrypted, right? It's not being obfuscated or anything like that. It's on the clear. The data is on the clear, but if you use HTTPS, then it's secure. And star is not allowed in HTTPS. HTTPS does not allow you to just open up and say, oh, anybody can send me whatever they want. So there's two ways to fix that. Either make sure that your queries are all HTTPS, just HTTP and not HTTPS. What I think it's happening to most students is that they're going to HTTPS with their browser, right? And that means that all communication is secure, and so that's why star doesn't work, right? So either go in and don't use HTTPS, just use plain HTTP, or the other option is to put here an array, or is it a maybe it's a like that. Right, and here you would put exactly the domain where you want to receive your request. Right, you could say, I am accepting requests from localhost 3000. I'm also accepting it from whatever other, maybe a Heroku URL as well. So I'm accepting it from my herokuapp.com. Okay, you have to explicitly list. So if you want HTTPS to work, then you have to explicitly list all the domains that you're accepting queries from, or you can leave it as just star. You leave it as just plain old star, but then you can't use HTTPS, just plain old HTTP, which is fine, right? Either one is fine, right? You can try both. Okay. All right. All right. Let's leave that there. I do want to just go a little further on the login. Okay. Right. So all right. So we saw some examples on being able to set attributes and retrieve attributes. Okay. And so now using those techniques, we could create certain things like this. For instance, we can say we can create. We don't have a database just yet, right? So my database is just going to be this array of users, right? So let's go here in the HTTPS session. Let's create just an array here. You have users. Do I have users here? Oh, I don't have a user object. Let me create a user object real quick. New Java class user, and let's just put here a couple things here. So private string, and this will be username, and private string password. Okay. And let's generate setters and getters. Import class. Yeah, that one. And list. Import the class. Okay. And array list. There we go. Okay, so what I could do here is that I'm going to register a person. And I'm just going to make it a get here because I don't want to have to generate a post. So I'm going to say get. So API register, and I'm going to pass a here maybe username and password. Right, so I'm going to pass here username and password. Okay, and I'm just going to parse that from here. So this will be path variable, username, right? And I'll need password as well. This will be a string username, and this will be string password. There we go. So say I register, and I'm going to create a new object, a user object. New user, and I populate user.set password, and user.set password username. Right, and I'm going to remember that I'm going to make them logged in already. And the way that I'm going to log them in is that I'm just going to keep track of the current user who's logged in, right? And the object, I'm just going to put it in there, and I'm going to add it to my array of users, presumably stored in some database. Right? We don't have a database yet, so my database is just this array. Make sense? And so now I remember that this person is registered and they are logged in. They're logged in, yeah, because that's how I'm remembering that this person is logged in. In this session, for that particular person, they'll have that cookie. Okay. All right. So what about log? So I can then ask, well, who is currently logged in? I can ask a profile function. Profile will tell me, is anybody logged in? And it's just going to return the user, current user from the user, right? It's going to, and then return it. And this will be null if nobody's logged in, right? Or it's going to return to me who's the currently logged in person. Okay, and retrieve the profile. Or I can log in. I can log out. Log out will allow me to invalidate the session, meaning clear out any sessions that I had, any cookies that I had before, right? Just make them invalid, right? That means that nobody's going to be stored anymore in any session object. So again, we can just put get here so that it'll be easier. So invalidate the session, and finally I can do a login. I can log in. My login, basically, it's going to be, I'm going to pass you I'm going to pass you username, and I'm going to pass you password. Notice normally you would use post, not get, like I'm doing, right? But I'm doing it just to show you, right? And here I'm going to parse the username and password from the path. There we go. And so I'm going to say, you know, if I'm iterating, right, and the username matches the username here, and the password of the user matches the password that I'm passing, right? So if those two match, then user is the current user, right? And then we're going to return that user. Otherwise, I'm going to return null and nobody's logged in. All right, so let's try it out. All right, so let's run this. Okay, and the same thing, right? Let's have two browsers. Have both browsers here. Okay, and so in this one, I'm gonna register. I'm gonna say, what was the API login, API profile, API register. Okay, so let's register here. We're gonna say API register, and I'm gonna register as Alice, and password is P1. All right, so it comes back. Oh, what happened to the username? Something happened. Did I misspell it? Username. Oh, password. Oh, this username. There we go. And yeah, let's try that again. Every time I restart the server, it's going to blow away anything that it remembers, right? So it only remembers as long as the server is running. Okay, so let's do this again. Let's I'm going to register Alice. All right, comes back as Alice, right? I can ask. Let me clear this. I can now ask who's logged in. I can say localhost 8080, and it'll be API profile. Who's the current profile? What's the current profile? Notice it returns Alice. See that? I can log out. I can say localhost 8080 and say API log out. Okay, so it's logged out. So if I go back in and check to see what the profile is, notice that returns null, right? I can log back in. I can say API login, and it's Alice and P1. So now I'm logged in. So if I go back to profile and I refresh, notice that it tells me that Alice is logged in, right? And this is completely separate, right, for somebody who has a different session, right? So independently, I can be talking in a different browser, localhost 8080. Right, and so this one says, what is the current profile? Let's see what this one says. API, session dot profile. Notice that there isn't session. Oh no, wait, profile. Sorry, profile. Notice that it doesn't come back with anything because nobody has logged in. Now, Alice could log in both sessions, right? So, for instance, Alice could log in here. This is in a different tab. It could be localhost 8080. So this is the same thing as Alice going in two separate machines, right, and logging in. So this would be API login and Alice P1. So now Alice is logged in both places. Alice could log out from one. Alice could log out from this one, right? So if I look at the profile, notice that Alice doesn't exist here, but she could still be logged in over here. Right, she's still logged in over here, independently of what happens in some other browser, right? So if I do the profile, notice that indeed I am logged in the session over here, right? Until I log out from this one, saying localhost 8080 API log out. Right, it's gone, and so now the profile is gone. That makes sense. Obviously, you would not use get like I'm doing here, right? Whenever you send any information that includes any identifying information like username, password, things like that, you would never send it using get, right? Instead, you would use post, like the slideshow, right? The slides are using posts for logging in, right? For registering, so it's using posts. So what happens is that instead of passing the username and password as part of the URL, they're embedded inside of a JSON object, and that JSON object typically would be encoded, it would be encrypted, right? And so that nobody who would be listening in between would be able to see that content. Well, that's not true. Actually, that would only happen if you are using HTTPS. If you're using HTTPS, then yes, the body, everything inside will be encrypted, and nobody would be able to see any information in there, right? Now, for HTTPS to work, at least in Heroku, that's not a free service. If you want things to be actually encrypted, you have to pay, but you don't have to for this class. You can still use HTTPS, but it will not be encrypted, right? You would have to pay extra and whatever, but you don't need to for this class. But so you know, right? If you do want to have secure communication back and forth, right? Be passing along, social security numbers or credit card numbers and things like that, right? Real ones anyway, right? You should be using HTTPS, right? All the data would be encrypted, right? And the cookies would be encrypted. Everything would be from end to end. All right. All right. I'm going to push both the profile and also the examples that we did. You can log in, profile, and you can start that going forward. Okay. So, any questions? It says, hi, Professor, that question will be in, but I'm curious in case millions of people logged in and want to reach out of the same object at the same time in our app, which part here of the application response for handling consistency and delay? Yeah, so a word on performance. So most of the times you want to minimize any state management by the server, right? And as much as you can, delegate that state management to the client as much as you can, because if you're maintaining sessions, right, for thousands of people, you could really hit really bad on the server performance, right? Because it has to maintain all that RAM, all those extra objects for thousands of people, and so it really would increase the footprint of your server, right? So you need to design it in such a way that if you're maintaining in a session, it would be minuscule, right? Instead, it's better to offload anything to the database, right? So that you can always retrieve data, right? And send it back to the client, and then just release it, right? It was just temporary, and it's gone, and then the user interface is just rendering and is maintaining the state as part of the URL, okay? But you can't do that with session information like username and passwords and things like that, right? So for that you do need the server to remember. So at least the identity of the person, but any ancillary information like any data information for that user, right, could be stored elsewhere, not necessarily in the session. So only the identity it's enough, right, to know, and then everything else you can load dynamically, right? Also, usually, if you're talking about thousands, millions, typically you don't have just one server. You have a many servers that are in some kind of round robin configuration where they're all receiving requests, and you have a switch that decides, depending on the load of the servers, deciding which server is going to take the request. Right, the one that with the least load is we redirect the request to the server who has least load, and then that server then talks to that one person, right? And also obviously, and all this information that is being maintained in memory needs to be cleaned up, right? If a person just stops having a conversation with the server, it makes no sense to keep that information in memory, right? So usually all these sessions have a default timeout, right? That the sessions will time out after a while, so that we can release any RAM that the CPU is maintaining. So there's a lot of performance considerations. This course doesn't go into details of that, but certainly we can have a discussion, but offline. All right, excellent. Any other questions? All right, everyone. If you, this is somebody who let's anybody who wants to discuss. Let's see, Jack. Let's discuss offline, perhaps in office hours. All right, Jack, you want to join office hours real quick? Jack Petrazzini. Right, bye. Bye, everyone.